Hi, good afternoon, folks. Thank you all for joining. I have some construction in the background and audio, so well, you can hear it now. It's starting. I'll go ahead and start out. We'll wait a couple minutes for folks to jump in and look forward to seeing you all. Hi, good afternoon, all. Maybe we could start out this meeting by having our interpretation folks go ahead and start the interpretation guidelines and some of the instructions.
Thank you very much. Buenas tardes a todos. Nada más queremos recordarles que tenemos interpretación disponible en español para ustedes y ya está encendida. Si ingresaron con una computadora, van a ver el icono de un mundo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla. Por favor, selecciónenlo y seleccionen el canal de español. También pueden silenciar el audio original para que escuchen solo una voz a la vez. Si ingresaron con un teléfono móvil o con una tableta, van a tocar su pantalla. Van a buscar por los tres puntitos en el menú de Zoom, donde diga interpretación de idiomas. Después seleccionen el canal de español, silenciar el audio original nuevamente y por último el botón que diga done, listo, finalizado para que ya nos puedan escuchar en el canal. Gracias. Ahora voy a dar mis instrucciones en inglés. Hello, everyone. This is just a reminder that we have a Spanish interpretation available. So if you're a monolingual English speaker, we remind you to please select the English channel. That way you can hear any comments from Spanish into English. If you're joining with a computer, you'll see a glove at the bottom of your screen. Please click on the glove and select the English channel. If you're joining with a cell phone or a tablet, you need to tap your screen, find the three dots, select language interpretation, select English, and then click done. That way you'll be able to hear the interpreter if any Spanish comments are made. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie, and I am a program manager in our community strategies and resources department here at the Valley Air District. I just maybe want to get a quick thumbs up to make sure interpretation is working. Is it working for everyone? All right, I think it is working. You folks, let us know if you're perfect. I see thumbs up. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And I want to thank all of our agency partners that are in the room as well. I think as folks know, so this is our oil and gas subcommittee, and this is several subcommittees that we've had that we've brought together all of these partners. And so we appreciate everyone for participating in this and bringing all of this information to our community steering committee. Today we have two big items for you all. For those of you that were at our last Arvin and Lamont CSC meeting, you might recall that there was a lot of really great topics that were brought up and a lot of questions and a lot of great feedback. And given that all of that conversation did happen, we did have one agenda item that we didn't quite get to. And so one of the items today will be to bring back the presentation that we had at our last CSC meeting that we didn't get a chance to go over, which is a presentation that's regarding a topic that I think has been highly requested and is pretty high priority to folks in this community. And so we'll be providing updates on recent amendments that we have to our oil and gas rules. And the other part of this meeting will be to hear updates from CalGEM, and they will be presenting on their plans to remediate and seal orphan wells in the community. Before we get started with that, does anyone have any questions? And I'm not seeing any questions, but I also, of course, want to thank our co-leads too, that have helped kind of provide feedback and shape the agendas that we have for these meetings. I also just wanted to kind of share the space and see if I don't see Bianca, but I do see Cesar here. So I just wanted to open it up to him as well if you had any comments before we got started.
Yeah, just thank you for everyone for joining, and like always, really appreciate the subcommittee space to be able to deal with community issues and community problems, and you know, with agencies that have historically been further out of reach to communities. It you know, brings joy to my heart to see that we're working together. So thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you so much. And if I don't see any other questions from community members, we'll go ahead and get started. And so I will go ahead and pass it over to Luis to get us started on our first presentation about updates to our oil and gas rules.
Thanks, Stephanie. Let me go ahead and share my screen here really quick. Okay, can everybody see the screen fine, the presentation? Perfect. So don't mind the date. That's the date from our previous CSC meeting. Presentation was supposed to take place then, but it will be the same presentation that we're planning to present about a week ago, a little bit over a week. Okay, if there's no audio issues, everybody can hear me fine, then we'll go ahead and get started. So this presentation will be an update on the oil and gas rule. Particularly, there's a total of 5 of them that were updated just recently, and we'll go through some of the steps that we took and a little bit of an update on the current changes. So in an effort to reduce emissions from sources in the oil and natural gas sector, the district has adopted and amended generations of rules to reduce emissions from oil and gas production operations, petroleum refineries, natural gas processing plants, and organic liquid storage and the transfer of that organic liquid. So additionally, through the SERP measure 4.B, the district actively reviews rules to pursue additional emissions reduction opportunities, including the rules that are subject to our oil and gas sectors. As any other rule amendment, the district went through a public process with many opportunities for CSC members and members of the public to provide comments throughout the amendment process of these rules. And throughout the amendment process, the district held meetings, including evening meetings, in-person meetings, with the intention to obtain as much feedback from the community members, organizations, and stakeholders. Additionally, prior to these meetings, reminders were sent out through district outlets and at CSC meetings such as these. Finally, all meeting notices and supporting material were provided and posted at the district website and emailed to CSC members. So the rules covered in this presentation consisted of a total of 5 of them, and we'll start off chronologically with Rule 4401. This rule limits volatile organic compound emissions, or VOC emissions, from steam enhanced crude oil production wells. Next, 4409, which limits VOC emissions from leaking components at light crude and oil production facilities, natural gas processing facilities, natural gas production facilities, followed by 4455, which limits VOC emissions from leaking components at petroleum refineries, gas liquid processing facilities, and chemical plants. Next, we have Rule 4623, which limits VOC emissions from storage of organic liquids. And lastly, Rule 4624, which limits VOC emissions from the transfer of those organic liquids. So these 5 rules provide leak detection and repair programs, or as you'll hear me say, LDAR programs, that operators in the oil and natural gas sector must implement into their operations. These LDAR programs define leaks, leak limits that components must be under, or they would be considered leaking, and those requirements also put a time frame on how quickly an operator must repair the leak. Now, to provide a little update on the recent actions on these rules, the district's governing board approved the amendments to these rules back on June 15th, 2023, so a little bit over a month and a half ago. These amendments further reduce emissions from sources of oil and natural gas operations by reducing the leak standard in all of the rules, as I mentioned, like leaking components. It increases the inspection frequency of these components from operators, so they're required to inspect these components more frequently now, reducing the repair time for components found leaking. So now they must repair these components if they're found leaking in a much shorter time frame, depending on the size of the leak as well. Lastly, it overall increased the stringency and expanded the applicability of the rules to capture more units and make them subject to the rule requirements. All of these more stringent requirements take effect starting on July 1st of 2024. The amendments to these 5 rules was done through a comprehensive analysis of federal standards, state regulations, and analyzing other local air districts such as South Coast and Bay Area. And the total result of that created district rules that are strict and oftentimes go beyond all federal and state standards and regulations. And when compared to local districts such as South Coast and Bay Area, these rules tend to have lower leak limits as well for components. So now let's talk about the benefits of the emissions reduction achieved from these rules. So the primary emissions from oil and natural gas operations are volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, as I mentioned earlier. These VOCs are precursors to the creation of ozone, and exposure to ozone has been linked to a variety of health issues, including, but not limited to, chest pains, coughing, throat irritation, congestion, inflammation, and the list goes on. Additionally, fugitive VOCs may also contain hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs, such as benzene and other carcinogens. So for the district, the name of the game is always emissions reductions. And further reducing VOCs through amendments to rules such as these contribute to additional public health benefits in the San Joaquin Valley. And through these amendments just recently approved, the San Joaquin Valley will see VOC emission reduction of almost 2,200 pounds per day of VOCs, which majority of those will be in Kern County. So lastly, the district will continue to evaluate potential opportunities to strengthen these rules. Through this rule amendment, the district worked closely with CARB and EPA's oil and natural gas division staff, and we'll continue to work with them closely and other local air districts to support continued evaluations of these rules and any potential future changes that can be done. Currently, the state and EPA are actively working on amendments to their current regulations, and the district is committed to actively evaluate those changes and potentially change our current rules to meet those standards. Finally, we will continue to actively engage with community members and other organizations throughout the Central Valley to provide feedback on our rules and that outlet is always open. We're always taking feedback and questions as we see fit, and as you guys have any questions on any of the rules that are currently have been amended or currently posted in our district website. And that concludes the presentation. I'll open it up to any questions that anybody might have. Yes, I see one hand up.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. This is super good information, and happy to see that the standards have been made, higher with lower levels of detection for reporting, which has been an issue with, certain operators, especially within neighborhoods, getting, the difference between a violation and not a violation. So, very happy to see that issue being addressed. And the only question I have is if you could maybe go over the time limits for how long they have to make those repairs. I think under the methane rule, they should have like around 5 days, but maybe a quick overview for, how big the leak is, determines how much time they have. I think that'd be super helpful for me. Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Asad. Oh, can everybody hear me fine? Looks like I glitched a little bit, but yeah, so for depending on the type of the rule that we're looking at, as I mentioned, we do have 5 rules that we amended, and it is subject to the specific rule. But in most cases, whenever we were looking at minor leaks, if the rule already had a minor leak time limit established in the rule, those were looked to evaluate to be more stringent than the current state regulation. And in some cases, like for example, Rule 4623, there wasn't an established minor leak limit, which it now does, and it does mirror the current state regulations. So we're looking at, depending on the size of the leak, if it's a minor leak, which in this case now it is 500 parts per million by volume, it would vary on the rule, but every one of those rules were, if the time frame of those components were less stringent than other local air districts or the state regulation, or in some cases, the control techniques guideline published out by EPA, we made modifications to that to make it as stringent, if not more. But I can provide to you with further numbers in particular. If you want to take a look at the current rule, it is published as well, but I can follow up with you and give you exact numbers if that's what you're looking for too.
Yeah, that'd be super helpful. Thank you so much for that.
Of course. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any questions for Luis. Maybe one last call. Perfect. If there are no questions, if anyone does think of any questions or has any maybe further interest in kind of our rule development process or has any feedback that they want to provide, Luis, I'm wondering if you don't mind dropping your contact information into the chat for folks to reach out to you.
Sure. Yeah, I'll do that in just a sec.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Luis. And I'll go ahead and move us over to our next item and over to, I'm not sure who exactly it is, but I'll just generally pass it over to CalGEM.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'll just say a brief thing and then Robert's actually gonna walk through some material. Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Courtney Smith, Chief Deputy of Programs at CalGEM. Today, we wanted to share with you, I know I see some familiar names. I know some folks were able to attend our July public workshop where we were able to release our proposed plan for how to approach our state abandonment work. We got a bunch of federal and state money to seal wells that have been left orphaned by operators. And last month, we released our first set of proposed projects. Not everyone, though, I think had an opportunity to attend. So we thought it would be really helpful to share some of that information with everyone here in this venue. in particular, because part of our proposal is to seal wells in your community. So we want to make sure you're aware of that. We've got a process for public comment. You may have some questions, and Robert's going to do a little deeper dive so folks can understand what wells are proposed in your community. So with that, I'm going to kick it to Robert.
Thank you, Courtney. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Robert Schaaf, the California State Abandonment Program Manager for CalGEM. And as Courtney mentioned, I'm going to review the orphan well draft expenditure plan that was released on July 18th, and then go over some proposed early state abandonment projects near Arvin and Lamont. Next slide, please. So I know a lot of you have seen this before or had this background, but there may be some new people. So I just want to briefly go over the background of our orphan well abandonment program. California's oil industry had peak production in 1985 and has been in decline ever since. This decline has led to more wells being taken out of production and more orphan and deserted wells. Orphan wells are those that no longer have a viable, responsible operator to appropriately address the well, leaving it to the state to properly plug and abandon. Orphan wells are a priority for the state to address because left unremediated, these wells and facilities can contaminate waterways and soil, serve as a source of climate and air pollutants, and can present physical hazards to people and wildlife. We have recognized this problem for a while, but in the past we didn't have the funding to do things about it. But now that it's recognized that these wells can pose a threat to California communities, in 2022, the state appropriated $100 million in state funds and secured $25 million in federal funds to plug orphan wells. In addition, we are applying for up to $140 million in additional federal funds this year from the Department of Interior. These funds will provide an important down payment on addressing orphan wells in California, but they will not be sufficient to address them all. Given this, CalGEM has developed a systematic approach to prioritizing wells for state abandonment. Next slide, please. The process California used to prioritize wells and for abandonment has included robust public engagement, including holding several public meetings and comment periods and meeting with dozens of cities and counties. In order to ensure CalGEM's program reflects public feedback, CalGEM released on July 18th for public review and comment a draft expenditure plan, which provides a framework for spending state and federal money, including laying out program reporting metrics, workforce development, contract requirements, and proposes early projects for state abandonment. I did want to highlight an important element of the state abandonment program, and that's that the CalGEM is committed to provide high quality jobs for oil and gas workers transitioning from extraction to projects funded by this program. Work to abandon wells is considered public work. As such, all contractors are going to be required to pay prevailing wage and comply with apprenticeship utilization requirements pertaining to public work projects. In addition, CalGEM will be working to ensure a skilled and trained workforce is hired. Last year, the state budget appropriated $20 million to create a workforce training pilot to train displaced oil and gas workers in remediating legacy oil infrastructure. The Oil and Gas Well Capping Pilot Initiative aims to assist state-registered apprentices programs in creating curricula for training apprentices and to upskill journey persons on well capping projects. CalGEM and the California Workforce Development Board are working together to improve workforce education and training programs that support or advance high-quality work performance and increase access to high-quality jobs associated with abandonment of wells. CalGEM is also working to ensure that contractors that hire folks from these apprentice programs are prioritized for receiving state abandonment contracts. Next slide, please. The draft expenditure plan proposes several early potential projects for state abandonment. Approximately $80 million of state abandonment projects being proposed would tackle 378 wells across California. The estimated costs are for plugging and abandoning wells, removing facilities, and eliminating any threats to the environment and public safety for projects across the state of California. Roughly $31 million, or 40% of the total funds, will be used to abandon 126 wells located in disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. The proposed early projects are focused on high-risk wells. These are wells that pose threats to California communities or to the environment. Wells near sensitive receptors such as houses, schools, or hospitals have been given special attention. The wells include orphan wells declared hazardous and other orphan wells with a history of leaks located near people. Next slide, please. Now we're going to have a focus on the Kern County projects that are included in these early state abandonment projects. Near Bakersfield and in Bakersfield, there's 89 wells proposed for abandonment. Many of the wells are in the Fruitvale field, which is in various parts of Bakersfield itself. And we also have wells in the Kern Bluff field, which is just east of Bakersfield. In the Arvin Lamont area, we've included in this list 39 wells that are in the Mountain View field that are both near in the vicinities of Arvin and Lamont. Next slide, please. So in these proposed projects near Arvin and Lamont, we have a total of 39 wells. Sunray and Blackstone have 38 of these wells that were in this Arvin Lamont area community. These operators have multiple unresolved violations dating back to 2017 and have shown a general lack of good oil field practices. Blackstone Oil and Gas is the operator of wells that used to be operated by Sunray. So that's why there may be some confusion about who the operator is. And so we're kind of treating these wells as both Sunray and Blackstone. In addition, in a recent inspection, 11 of the Blackstone wells near Arvin and Lamont have been found to leaking gas. These are included in the wells that we propose to abandon. There is additionally another well that was operated by Prime Oil Company that's included in the list of the 39 wells that are going to be done in the Mountain View field near Arvin and Lamont. Next slide, please. This is a map of the wells. The little circles there are the wells themselves. The ones to the north in this map are the ones near Lamont, and the ones to the south are the ones near Arvin. This comes from our GIS orphan well mapping that's accessible on the CalGEM website. And these are the ones that have the rankings for the different wells ranking from tier 1 to tier 5, with tier 1 being the highest priority well and going down from there, like tier 2 is the next highest priority. So we have tier 1 wells plus a number of tier 2 and 3 wells in this Arvin Lamont area here. Next slide, please. So this is a closer up look of the wells near Lamont. As you can see, there's wells around the area and one well that's really in the midst of the Lamont community. So these are the wells that are targeted for these early abandonment projects of CalGEM. Next slide, please. This gives a closer up viewpoint of the Arvin wells. As you can see, there's a number of wells that are near the Arvin community, including some that are very near the school there, seen at the bottom of this photo. So these again are the wells that are being included in our early abandonment project program. Next slide, please. So where are we going from here? What are our next steps? They include finalizing the expenditure plan, after we receive and consider public comments. CalGEM will also continue its outreach to city and county governments located within the 7 counties to coordinate carrying out these abandonment projects. And lastly, once the expenditure plan is final, we will begin contracting the early abandonment projects. Next slide, please. We will be receiving public comments until August 11th, so that's pretty soon. That's Friday of this week. But you still have time to get them in. The draft expenditure plan is available for review on the CalGEM website. Any comments you do have can be emailed to us at calgem.orphanwells@conservation.ca.gov. We do want to receive your comments. After today's meeting, submitting them to this email address is the easiest way to pass them on to us. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time, and we're open, the group of us, for questions that you may have.
I do see in the chat, Christine asking if we can share a copy of the slides. Absolutely, we'll send that along to Stephanie and Eric to be able to distribute. Okay, also just saw Christine's note around reaching out to her, Robert in particular. That would be great, Christine. We'd be happy to reach out to you. Also, as we start to move forward on some of these projects, depending on their nature, coordinating with locals is going to be really key. So absolutely plan to add you to that list. Okay, any other questions or feedback? All right, as Robert mentioned, till the end of the week, if folks want to weigh in, just really wanted to make sure we had some space to share with you all what we're planning to do, since part of our proposal very much will be focused on wells in your community. I wanted to make sure you're aware of that. If you had questions or concerns, that we could talk through it. And of course, if you think of something after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
And I'm seeing a hand, Courtney from Cesar.
Oh, great. Hey, Cesar.
Hi, thank you for sharing this information. Definitely looking forward to this and future next steps on addressing problematic wells in the area. So I think this is an awesome next step, and would love to stay in touch with here in the subcommittee, and also hear any future plans or discussions around the inspections in the Shafter area, and how y'all have coordinated communication plans on how to notify community members, and what the conditions are for, or if there are certain conditions that have been discussed on what is needed to trigger that type of notification when there is a hazardous leak in communities.
Yeah, so maybe two separate things. Absolutely, as our state abandonment work progresses, we'll continue to leverage this as a venue to be able to share that and be in conversation with community on that work. And then separately, look forward to seeing you on Monday when we sit down with the Shafter CSC and talk through a proposal for joint inspection. Some of the things that you just mentioned will be addressed there, and we're looking forward to that.
Seeing a
Cool.
thumbs up from Cesar. Do we have any other questions for Courtney or Robert or any of the CalGEM team? Again, highlighting they do have public comments open until this Friday, so get them in. I know that they shared the email, but I'm sure also you all are open. Are you all open to receiving comments also via phone or any other way?
Yeah, absolutely. If folks want to reach out to us in another way, we're happy to jot down some notes.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you so much to Courtney and Robert. At this time, I just want to open it up to any other CSC members for any comments, any questions, anything you all want to bring up. Again, this is your time and your meeting. So we just want to make sure that you all have the space to bring up any of your concerns. This is kind of your open floor to bring anything up to CalGEM, to the district, to fellow CSC members. Go ahead, Cesar.
Yeah, thank you. One question I have, and a question that I've gotten a lot from community members that I haven't really been able to answer is, how is it that oil wells can be abandoned? Like, how can companies be responsible for the well and, you know, kind of just like leave it alone and make it our responsibility? What's the process through which they can abandon it? Or is this something that shouldn't be happening, and you're addressing those abandoned wells that were left abandoned improperly?
Yeah, so certainly, and also too, I'll just share, Cesar, we've got, our team, and maybe Christina, you can help, we can pass along to you to also share with folks who are asking, and if you're feeling questions around, like, how do we get to this stage where we have like wells that are orphaned? We have a lot of, we got a lot of questions around that through the methane task force. So we did put together some, since it's a frequently asked question, we put together some written response. So that'll be a great resource. We're happy to pass that along to you, and maybe that'll help amplify the answer. I would say, in short, of course, it's not something we want to happen. You know, CalGEM, we have a fairly broad authority over oil and gas operators. We have some authorities in place to be able to ensure that there is some financial security in place should there be a situation in which the company goes belly up. For us, we go through a process where if we've identified that an operator happens to not be complying, that's usually complying with our laws. That tends to be an indication that their company is just no longer around. We do, however, take them through an enforcement process, and Matt, our enforcement chief, is here today too, so he may want to add some to this. But generally, we do everything that we can to hold that operator accountable within our authority. That includes issuing an order to them, to order them to basically clean up their wells and their sites. Oftentimes, they're, you know, when we're at this stage, it's because the operator has not complied with that order, and they typically demonstrate that they don't have the financial resources, if there's anyone even around, to be honest. But we are going through that process. You know, another thing too that we are exploring is, or that we're part of our evaluation, is whether the operator, we actually review their financials and try to see if there's assets, because we do have some authority to go after them and put liens on their property. But ultimately, you know, it's still clear that these are sites that we have concerns about, right? You guys have concerns about. So we want to be able to go in, step in, clean them up. It doesn't preclude us from after the fact, should we identify an operator as having assets, from going after them for that for that money. I don't know, Matt, would you add anything to that?
I would just say that, you know, our authority to go after previous operators is there, but limited to operators that owned or operated the well from January 1st, 1996 onward. So if they had transferred the well to an other current operator, and that current operator is bankrupt, we could seek the previous operator up into that date to plug an abandoned well and pay for that. So that's part of the steps and exercises that we're going through and developing that process even further. But other than that, I think Courtney, you did a great job summarizing what we do.
Do you have any follow-on questions, Cesar?
No, that was it. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool.
Go ahead. I see Maria and Roberto.
Sí, buenas tardes.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Maria Estela. And my comment is only to, more than anything, to tell the people who were giving the presentation that everything that we heard sounds good and everything that's being commented. And what I heard, there are a lot of funds from the state and the federal government, and there's a lot of money, and we are talking about millions. So we really hope that they don't spend that much money in training, and maybe they will just leave a little bit for the wells that we have in the communities, because as you know, we are here in this program, AB 617, and we're dealing with all this pollution from the pesticides and the oil wells. So hearing all of these that you're talking about, that we have so much money and so much funds, we really hope that we can reach that they can be able to clean a little bit our communities, and they can get rid of these wells that we have around our houses. And that, for me, sounds really good. And just thank you for the work that you're doing, all these people who are doing this dream come true. Thank you.
Really appreciate that feedback, Maria. And yeah, we agree. We're also very much looking forward to this opportunity. You know, this is an unprecedented amount of funding that we have to address wells in folks' community that have been orphaned. One thing we might want to mention is the vast majority of the funding that we're getting is going directly to cleanup and sealing of wells. In fact, the federal monies that we have, there's a requirement that 90% of the money goes to that, and only 10% for the administration. And so we're absolutely adhering to that. It's and our goal is to get as much money as possible into the projects. Do you want to add anything to that, Robert?
No, I think that really covers it, is that we are trying to do as many wells as we can, and that's with the money that we have. And that's been part of the program that, for instance, we want to make sure that the wells we go after are accessible, so that we're going to get as many wells as we can do, and not try to get wells that we can't reach.
Any other questions from folks? Okay, well, thank you so much for giving us some of your time this afternoon. And as previously mentioned, as this program evolves, we will absolutely plan to bring important milestones and updates to Arvin Lamont CSC. You guys are a really important part of making sure that as we carry out this work, we're being cognizant too of while we all agree that in the long run, this is what's best for the community, for the environment, the act of going in and sealing these wells will require, rigs to go in. It's a project, and we'll want to make sure and be communicative around what that entails. So we make sure that, the actual sealing and plugging isn't, we're addressing or cognizant of any potential impacts that might have on the local community. So that will definitely be a conversation that we'll have with you all. I'm looking forward to it. Appreciate folks' feedback.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And I think just generally, I know these sentiments were shared during our last Arvin Lamont CSC meeting, but I think there's just so much appreciation from us at the district and also from the CSC about this partnership, and just about CalGEM's willingness to come to the CSC and ask for feedback, provide updates. And so we so appreciate all of your team, Courtney, Matthew, Robert, and the whole CalGEM team for coming to give these updates and for committing to continuing to bring these updates. With that, I'm happy to open it up to any last questions. Those were the two main topics that we wanted to bring to folks. Again, the amendments to our oil and gas rules, and then just the update about the state expenditure plan and opportunities for the public, including the CSC, to provide feedback on that. And if we don't hear any other questions or comments, I'm happy to give folks the rest of their afternoon back. And I'm seeing a question from Christine in the chat that I can read aloud. What about pipelines that are in the ground? If the well is no longer in service and abandoned, wouldn't it make more sense to remove those lines?
Robert, you want to take that one?
Sure. Okay, so one of the problems with pipelines that are underground is we don't usually have good mapping of where they are and where they go to. And so the typical procedure when you have underground pipelines is to clean them out and then fill them with an inert fluid like water or nitrogen. And that's been done quite extensively in many places, because there are so many pipelines of various types underneath the ground there. You'd probably be surprised at how many different pipelines you'll find going down roads and crossing fields and other places. And unfortunately, in many cases, they're not good maps of them. So as opposed to we've found that the best procedure for underground pipelines, not in all cases, but in most cases, is to clean them out and to fill them with inert fluids to make them safe and not going to cause any problems in the future.
And just to maybe state I think what was implicit in Robert's answer is that would be part of this work. We're not proposing just to seal wells, but also, depending on what facilities might be on site, and that includes pipelines, tanks, vessels. The scope of this work is not just sealing wells, it's also addressing and decommissioning those facilities. I know there's a lot of focus on wells, but sometimes, honestly, the focus on the facilities is, is as important, if not more so.
Can I briefly also, Courtney, reiterate what you said? We will be, after we abandon these wells, as Courtney said, we will be putting those leases and facilities back to the natural condition as much as we can and remove all the hazards from the site.
Thanks, Rohit and Courtney and Robert. Christine, do you have any follow-up questions, or does that answer your question? You let us know in the chat if you need any further clarification. And I'm looking around the room to see if there's any other questions we have from community members. Oh, go ahead, Cesar.
Yeah, I know these wells that are being addressed with the funding that we need, because a lot of these operators are defunct or like impossible to reach. So would the next step be identifying the problematic operators that have those violations, ongoing violations, and still have some liquidity to be able to get them to pay for their wells so that we don't have to continue using this fund?
100%. Our goal internally, Cesar, is to do that review, that financial review of every single operator that we are proposing to do state abandonment for. We are fortunate that we have the authority. If we do find that an operator has property, we are fortunate in that we could issue a lien against that property, either based on what we estimate the cost to be, so even before we carry it out, or after we carry it out, we can do it after the fact. So that's authority that we are planning to use systematically where we can. So what that means is, our top priority for doing the review of the assets that these defunct operators may have is to do that review for every single operator that we're proposing to do a state abandonment for. Most of them, we probably won't find any assets, is the reality. But for those that we do, we will work with the state controller's office, and we have experience doing this, and go ahead and issue a lien against that property. But that's something actually, my whole team on the, like all my colleagues here on this call, like Rohit, Matt, Robert, we've been actively, and we basically meet weekly to strengthen that process to make sure we're prepared to do just that.
Thanks, Courtney, for responding to that. And I'm seeing a thank you from Cesar in the chat too. I'm not seeing any other hands up. Appreciate kind of the space to just have general questions from you all. But at this time, I'm not seeing any more. So I'll go ahead and kind of move on to wrapping us up. Again, we thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon and sharing kind of your time with us to dig into air quality concerns that you have in your community. And of course, appreciation to CalGEM for joining us as well and providing updates on their state expenditure plan. We will be working with kind of CalGEM to provide any updates at our next oil and gas subcommittee, which, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but will be in October. Seeing a nod. And we'll work with CalGEM to provide it to see what updates we have, but also if any CSE members have any topics that they want to recommend to us. In the meantime, please either share in the chat or feel free to verbalize it or even just email us as well. We're happy to take those suggestions for our next meeting. And with that, thank you so much again, and we hope you all have a great afternoon. Take care.
You too.